This is the second in the series of recordings on the Public Inspection Report of 2017. In the first recording, we covered the background and overview, and then we also looked at the sanctions, remedial action, and future outlook. So in this table of contents, we basically dealt with numbers 1, 3, 4, and 5. In this recording, I'm going to cover section 2, and specifically 2.1 only. So the inspections dealt with firm inspections as well as 2.2 engagement inspections. This is only going to look at firm inspections. So firm inspections is the part of the inspection that deals with the firm as a whole. So it's not covering individual audit files. They may select audit files to see the quality control procedures of the firm, but the purpose is to look at the firm, not at the file. So this section is only going to deal with firm inspections, and in the next one we are going to cover engagement inspections. If you can just have a look at the firm inspection contents, they looked at 6 elements as well as reportable irregularities. So it's the first 6 are the common elements of quality control, and number 7 deals with reportable irregularities specifically. Leadership responsibilities, ethics, acceptance and continuance of relationships and engagements, human resources, engagement performance and internal quality review, monitoring and reportable irregularities then, as I said. So we're going to have a look at those 7 now. Firstly, firm inspections. There's an overview of the firm inspections on 2.1, and they said that they performed 23 firm inspections. Of the firms that were inspected, significant deficiencies were reported on 16 of these firms. That's quite a high failure rate. 16 deficiencies out of 23. The first element that they look at is leadership responsibility for quality within the firm. That is the so-called tone at the top. They recognize that the leadership responsibilities is the first step in terms of quality control, and that is where quality control should start. So here are a couple of points that they mentioned. They encourage that firm leadership becomes more involved. The leaders of the firm, right at the top, the managing partner, the senior partners, not just the audit partners, should become more involved during the firm and audit inspections. During the inspection process, they should be involved in it. Apparently, there are some firms where the leadership isn't that involved, and that is obviously something that needs to be encouraged. Also encouraged to promptly communicate and monitor common weaknesses. If something is found, it must be communicated properly. And firm leadership is expected to encourage engagement partners, and this goes hand in hand with the next bullet. The firms be aware of not allowing commercial interests to interfere with the quality of audits. So the firm shouldn't put pressure on the partners to be profitable. Well, there should be pressure on the partners, but not undue pressure on the partners to be profitable at the cost of quality. And then lastly, the firm leadership should be certain that audit quality is appropriate on all audits. So we commonly look at the public interest audit or category A audits, but the role of the firm leadership is to ensure that there are systems in place to make sure that quality is consistent across all aspects of all audits, not only those audits that the firm looked at in internal monitoring or that IRBA has looked at or that IRBA is going to look at. So that's as far as the tone at the top is concerned. The second element that they look at is the relevant ethical responsibilities. The reporting that there are still numerous Section 92 contraventions where auditors prohibited non-audit services. Typically, auditors prepare the financial statements and they also audit the company, and it is a company that is subject to Section 90, so it's a compulsory audit. Then auditors obviously can't provide non-audit services like financial statement preparation, and that is still happening, and that is dealt with quite severely at the moment. It seems like it's going to the inspections committee for dealing with it. IRBA is also now dealing with our compliance with the auditor tenure rule. The auditor tenure rule is that rule that was implemented in 2016 or maybe 15, where auditors had to start disclosing how long they have been with the firm. You have to actually put it in the audit report. Now, auditors do put it in the audit report, but it seems like they're not checking those numbers. Those numbers are put in the audit report, and they are sometimes wrong. Sometimes they are understated more more cases. Or they try to obscure it with other information. They add other information in that's not relevant. A lot of this comes back to audit independence. And IRBA, in their view, audit independence is a root cause of most of the deficiencies that have been identified. They deal with mandatory audit firm rotation. I'm not going to deal with that now because it's only happening later. In the next element that they deal with is number 3, acceptance and continuance of client relationships and specific engagements. So who do you accept as a client? Once you've accepted it, what engagements do you accept for them? And this is becoming quite a big area. You will know that from the news lately, where auditors have got into trouble because they have not been so vigilant as far as which clients they are accepting. That's something that we need to look at more closely. Which clients, which individuals are we associating ourselves with, and for which would it be better to walk away, because either it would be a reputational risk, a business risk, or maybe we just can't service the client well enough because we just don't have the resources. They have found a couple of issues there, like I just mentioned, independence and things like that. And these procedures should be, as they call it, robust. You need to make sure that if, let's say you've had a client for a long time, if you get a new engagement for that client, we should also go through procedures. So let's say, for example, we've been doing tax work for the client for a long time. Maybe that client is not appropriate as an assurance client, although it might have been okay for tax, or maybe it might have been okay a couple of years ago, but not anymore. So we need to look very carefully at which clients we accept and which clients do we keep. Element number 4, human resources. In a lot of the inspections, and even the internal inspections that we perform, the cause for deficiencies is that people do not have enough staff. We have gone through a stage where it was really difficult, and we're probably still in it, where it's really difficult to get audit staff at all levels, starting from right at the bottom all the way up to partners. Difficult to get people with the right experience and the right skills. And this is something that needs to be planned ahead for. We can't be allowed to be surprised all the time if we don't have staff. You must look at the staff complement and make sure that your staff complement is sufficient to service the clients. Then the next section is a big one. That's section 5. It deals with the actual performance of audit work. And they've found a couple of significant recurring deficiencies. I'm going to run through it relatively quickly. It's all under one heading of engagement performance and internal quality reviews. The engagement quality control review has been found to be sufficient. So that's where the second partner looks at the file, engagement quality control review. There are some of the issues found: insufficient evidence that the scope of the EQCR was appropriate. So they didn't look at enough work. Obviously, an EQCR can choose what they look at, but that scope must be appropriate for the audit and for the risks identified. And once the EQCR has decided on a scope, there's not enough documentation of what the scope was and what the audit documentation was that was reviewed. Also importantly, the EQCR should sign off before the audit report is issued, but also be involved at the planning stage. By the time the audit report is issued, there's not enough time to go and amend evidence or procedures or anything like that. The EQCR should be involved at the planning stage already. Insufficient evidence on files that recommendations made by the reviewer had been implemented. And then lastly, the IRBA inspector would re-review the file. And if they find findings that the EQCR didn't find, obviously they would look at the same areas once they've identified the scope as sufficient, then they would re-review the file. And if they find evidence or significant deficiencies that were not identified, then that in itself becomes a finding. That becomes an EQCR finding because obviously the review was not adequately performed. The next part deals with file tampering. This is the rule where the file has to be signed off locked down within 60 days. It looks like some firms are still not getting that quite right, and files are either not locked down properly, they're not locked down at all, or after the period, the documentation is still added. So obviously something is wrong there. This is something that is receiving a lot of attention, and you will see in the IRBA news bulletins and so on where they are looking at file tampering, and that's a big area, as I say. And the last element of quality control that they deal with is monitoring. Monitoring being the internal inspection process where the firm inspects its own files and so on. And there they've also had quite a few findings. One similar to the one that I raised in EQCR just now, that is that the IRBA inspector would take the file and re-review the file, and if they find findings that the internal inspector did not find, then that becomes a finding itself. They also found insufficient documentation of the firm's consideration of who is going to review it. Sometimes firms allocate 2 junior people to review the file, and that's obviously not good enough. And also declaration of independence. There must be independence by the internal reviewer. Obviously, otherwise, I mean, the internal reviewer can't review his own file or something where he has been involved in. Okay, that was all the 6 elements in terms of quality control. Lastly, they also deal on the firm level, they also deal with reportable irregularities. And there's a definition of reportable irregularities, and the point that they are making here is that there are a lot of findings where a lot of cases where financial statements are not prepared within the 6-month period that the Companies Act requires. Now, that in itself is not a reportable irregularity, but it may be because it is obviously a contravention of legislation. If that happens, you have to go through the process of assessing the other elements of reportable irregularities. If the other elements are present, then an irregularity should be reported. If not, there should be at least evidence in the file that it has been done and it has been considered and found that it wasn't necessary. Then some people don't keep accurate accounting records, and that has not been declared that accurate accounting records are not kept. So this is, as far as this section is concerned, the section dealing with the firm level review of the IRBA. We dealt with the 7 sections on the screen now. Leadership responsibilities, that's the tone at the top. Relevant ethical responsibilities, mainly to do with independence, acceptance and